Because if you can just reference the page.
Order, all who wish, join us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So there are two proposed agenda adjustments. One would be to add an item 8C, approve safety care coordinator stipend. The other would be to take 7A, audit presentation, and to move it after 5 and before 6. Just so our guests can get out of here earlier. I would make a motion to make those two changes. Is there a second?
A second.
Any additional requests or changes? We'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Next up is consideration of the minutes. I would make a motion to approve the minutes for January 10th as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or corrections? Go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Make a motion to approve warrants, regular warrant 15 and payroll warrant 15. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Floor is now open for public comment. Anybody who'd like to speak? Not seeing anybody jumping in. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to acknowledgements. Okay.
Nothing.
I don't think I have anything either. Kevin?
Nothing at this time.
No.
Nothing from you, thank you.
Meredith?
Just the donation that's on the agenda. We just want to acknowledge BJ Bowden and the club that she started to focus on school mental health, or mental health at the high school. And they sought out this Donor's Choose project and are funding some supplies to contribute to their efforts as a club. Also, it was announced this weekend that Ruth White won the Gatorade Athlete of the Year for cross country for Maine again, second year in a row. So, you know, another well-deserved recognition for Ruth. Congratulations to her.
At this point, we'll go ahead and move on to the audit report. Do you want to introduce Meredith?
Yes, thank you. We have with us tonight Craig Costello, who is leads the audit for us every year. And Craig is here to kind of walk through the highlights of the report. As I said last meeting, you know, this is it's a standard report we get every year, but it's a different language than I speak. So I often appreciate Craig's interpreting us and leading us to maybe the most important elements for us to key in on. And you have an electronic version of this and that I emailed you, but also in the board folder. So I'll share my screen though, so we can also have a visual for where Craig is referencing as he moves through the presentation. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Okay, good evening. Good evening. So I'll be starting with page 15, Meredith, if you wanted to go to that. Okay. But I did want to start off with the fact that I didn't have any findings this year. It was a fairly clean audit, despite the fact that we had to choose extra testing items, programs to test. It was fairly clean. We got it done in an efficient time, even though we started it around the same time, but finished not long after and got the report out. So it was well done by the office staff and Lynn and all involved. So I commend everyone on that process. So overall, similar number of pages in this report, some added items to it, a lengthier opinion in the beginning. The beginning opinion gives you an unmodified opinion, which is no indications of any major problems that needed to be addressed within the opinion letter. So I'll just go on to the financial page, starting with the page 15. And the only thing I'll say about this is what I've said in the past. This just presents the financials on a business type activity. So it's more set up so that you present your assets as well as liabilities on here. So in your typical financials that you receive during the year, you're not seeing, you wouldn't have this in that presented in this format because you're more on a governmental budget basis where you don't, where you budget your debt service payments in the expenditures. The debt service payments go against the liabilities in this case. So same as assets are added, capital assets are added to this financial statement, whereas they're not in the other statements in the normal governmental accounting. So you come down to that net position. It's going to be higher than normal in the other because of the fact that you're sitting on all those capital assets up above. But from a bank perspective, it's kind of a good look at the overall financial picture of a district. So that's all there is to say on that page. So the next page is the very strange looking presentation of your expenditures and revenues. So it's presenting your revenues that could be associated with some of these expenditure items, as well as adjustments that are affected, that only get affected on this type of statement. So these liability accounts that are brought on that previous page. So it's very different than your regular format again. So, and then coming down to that net position total again there. So I will highlight now on this statement though, you're going to see a restatement down at the bottom. That big change of 839,000, it's also presented in another statement. That is because the debt service that was reflected in a previous year as being received, or as if you had owed that, had not been taken. It had been changed through that construction project. So we had to write down that amount from that position, from that net position. And we did the same on the other statements in the construction account. So just to highlight that in case that stands out at all. So if you want to flip to the next page, 17. This presents how you ended up in each fund. So you got your general fund, your general operating budget fund, you got your special revenue fund, capital projects, and food service fund. So overall on your general fund, you ended with that unassigned balance down towards in the bottom of the first column, a carry forward of $2,798,000. So you're sitting on still a large amount of fund balance there. Then over on the special revenue fund, you have it split up between grants, scholarships, and then the student funds. So those are the three fund balance categories there. And there's more detail on these items in the footnote, in the notes, which I don't go over. But and then the other would be the capital projects fund. So balance is left in the projects, as well as any set aside reserves that you have there. So the 527,000 is your set aside for budgeted reserves, with the 1 million left in the construction project. And then your food service fund that ended at 228,000. So it's fairly healthy fund balance there as well. But that has been receiving increased funding in the last couple of years, which is directly related to that reason why that's much higher than in the past. So if there's no questions on that, I will go on to page 19, so you can skip. Yeah, there. So this is the traditional format of your revenue versus expenses, and this is by fund. Again, coming down to your total fund balances in each fund. And then you see your cost centers here as well. But I don't need to go over that. I'll skip. So if you want more detail on any of these balances, the rest of the pages from 21 all the way through 46, I believe, 47. Those are your footnotes. And so that just gives a lot more detail and explanation of the statements that I presented. And so I'll skip to page 49 and go over the budget versus actual. So exhibit 2 presents your budget versus actual after all the audit adjustments were made. Again, these would be different than what you would have seen at the end of June 30, 2022. So just show you how your fund balance ended from where you budgeted. So your revenues that you budgeted, you anticipated 14,574,000. You collected an actual amount of 14,558,000. So this was under budget by $15,000 in total. Your expenditures, you after some adjustments for use of carry forwards, you budgeted 15,967,000, and the actual spent was 14,891,000. So you had a positive variance there of 1,076,000. So you anticipated to take 1.3 million from your fund balance, but because of some of the positives in the expenditures, you did not need to take all of that. And therefore, you came down to that 2.9 million. It was a decrease over last year, but you also did some budget transfers, which to the other reserves, which I mentioned before. So overall, pretty good on that end as well. So those are the major highlights.
So this page is pretty important.
Yeah.
That to know that last year we drew down our fund balance by 605,781.
Yep.
Just in thinking about, as we move forward.
Yeah. And part of that's the plan to bring some of that down as well and set it aside for other purposes. But
so if we were not a school who had a state guideline on the 3%.
Yeah, it's 9% now. But
yeah. If we were a nonprofit, what would you consider a healthy reserve fund?
A nonprofit?
I'm just trying to think.
Yeah.
Comparable units.
Oh, right. Well,
maybe a town.
Well, there's a couple of rules of thumb is like 3 months of operating of your budget. Is one rule of thumb you could use. So you're looking at 5 million roughly but that'd be way too high.
Or you could probably get in trouble with
exactly. Exactly. So yeah.
That's right. I'm still learning. Second budget cycle here. We can't have too much money in savings, right?
Right. The amount of money that we can have sitting in the bank account that carries from one budget into the next is restricted by the state. The idea being they don't want us to tax people just to put money in the bank account. And so there's a cap on how much we can put in. It was historically 3%, which was ridiculously low. And as far as I know, every school in the state ignored that rule and kept more than 3%. But what did you say to do?
9%.
9%.
Yeah.
So 9% of budget can be kept.
And that's not necessarily in one particular year. It's you have a 3-year plan to bring that down. So you can use what you've already budgeted in your 22-23 budget year. Then you look ahead to your 23-24, and you can say that you've used your fund balance. Like last year, you used up 1.3 million, which is a high amount of that fund balance to use. Which also aided in the fact, like Meredith had pointed out, part of the reason why it decreased. So, so as long as you have that plan in place, then the state doesn't care. It's more about keeping within that plan and that 9%, that 9%. So, but as Brian alluded to, it's many districts have not followed, even in the past when it was 3%. Not many kept under that amount. So,
I mean, 3% is just scary low. Right? Yeah. It's something happens and all of a sudden you don't hit payroll or something like that. So, right. Just a little cash flow crunch.
Cash flow crunch.
Yeah.
9% of what number? 15 million?
The previous budget, total budget.
Which I guess would be just over 1.5 million gross.
Right.
We have
2.9. So but we have, quite a bit committed this year.
Yeah.
This year's budget.
So
that's what.
Right. So you take that 9% of that, subtract what you've already taken from this budget now that you're in. So this 22-23 year. And then you can subtract whatever you plan for the next month and then come down to your amount allowed, basically. To be brought forward.
But just to be clear for everybody, the state law would say we're supposed to have a 3-year plan to get down to 9%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, you know, was a conversation. What's your sense in terms of other districts? How many districts do you see in compliance with the 9%?
With that percentage, yes. Yeah, for sure.
I think we
Definitely.
would be.
Yeah, and you are.
We are.
We do the calculation for you, so to see already.
We are compliant.
Oh,
We are.
No. Because we've committed 893,000 to our carryover
okay.
and 404 to other projects.
Right.
Plus
They
then
can't
whatever we
carry
put
forward.
into
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
It's part of our
it's
revenue.
theoretically gonna be.
Yeah, and a great way to avoid it is that transfer of moving funds to a capital reserve or a maintenance reserve or a fuel reserve or something like that you can then take, or a contingency. So it allows for that, where you can still use it and transfer it back into your fund balance, but at least you're getting it out of that total category and for emergency things. So helps out.
Right, so the 2.9 million right now, that's more than 9%. Right.
Absolutely. If you just took that number.
Calculation.
Yes, yes.
So that we're purposely doing things with it to end up where we're supposed to be. But we're putting the money in places where we can still use it, but it just can't be right here. All right.
Yes.
I appreciate that too.
Yes.
When we get to budgets, we'll have a big conversation about carry forward, but that's a big piece of it.
I'm more
That's helpful
prepared.
context, yeah,
Yeah.
really helpful context.
And districts are all over the place as to what they're taking from their next budget, from their carry forward. But so it's, you know, it's. And fund balances have increased. The reason for the 9% now is they realized during COVID, the fund balances were increasing because of the extra federal funding coming in. And, you know, a lot of those extra funds that came in helped with a lot of budgets, a lot of fund balances, and increased them quite a bit everywhere, so.
You may recall last budget season, we talked about buying the multi-laptops out of the capital reserve fund. We talked about buying trucks out of the capital reserve. Right, we were pretty conscious that that was I don't know, an unusually high number. Whether it was a good or bad high number is another discussion, but it was an unusually high number. So we put money into the capital reserve fund. We did a lot of things to draw that number down.
But on that same token, this districts that did not have a healthy balance were really in trouble during the CRF, the first round of CRFs, because we had to spend our own money and wait for the state to get it back. And people were having to borrow money because they didn't have the money to spend. And we're really in trouble waiting for it to come back. So we were really lucky that we weren't in that position and we were able to use our money and wait for our revenue to come back without having to go out there and get a loan for money, waiting for the state to pay us back.
Yeah.
So there definitely are drawbacks to getting it too low.
Yeah, I mean, risk is the biggest, but
Right.
yeah, another one is when we went out for bonds. They basically penalize every school district in the state because of how low we have to keep that number. They expect us to behave like towns and other groups with a higher reserve fund, but relative to other schools, we had a higher undesignated fund balance, which helped us to get a better credit rating. Not that I think we're going to go out for bonds anytime soon again, but we do still have to refinance one more tranche, right? So our credit rating for that tranche will depend on that undesignated fund balance as well. So,
I know I had zero interest in getting down to 3%. I have slightly more getting to 9%, but I don't really care all that much about that either, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there's no, you know, compliance requirements. Or there's no, you know, fund balance police coming out, other than the auditor telling us each year.
Yeah, and the threat was that, I mean, the threat is that state subsidy would be cut, you know, for you in the next fiscal year, and that hasn't. I haven't seen it enforced, and I've seen many districts, you know, several districts over the years that have been over for years previous to the increase. So, but
we would, even if they were to do that, we need it based on what our plans are going forward.
Correct.
So we wouldn't
have any
penalty anyway.
Correct.
Craig, is that a rolling 3-year plan?
Yes.
So
Yes,
we can always
exactly.
correct.
Yes,
Oh, we didn't make it again. Let's
correct.
But just start to tie it to budget. Those are the two levers, right? We can set, we can't really. We try our best at recruiting, right, which is a healthy chunk of money, but that's not something we have control over in the end. The only real sources of revenue we have are the tax rate we set and the amount we take out of the undesignated fund. So those are the two trade-off levers real the board debates when we get to budget season. Plus, of course, cutting expenses, but
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there more?
No, that's.
I had a question. I mean, seeing a positive food service balance is a pretty new experience.
Yeah,
That's probably restricted. I know when it was under, we would always take general funds and put
Right,
it in.
no,
I imagine
it's-
we can't go the other
it's
direction.
restricted, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
So a lot of places that were funding their food service with a little bit of money just are stopping to fund that. They don't need to fund it because.
I'm trying to remember, did we have 100,000?
We had ours back,
Yeah, but we
but
still,
we still are doing it.
we had 50 in there last year.
What, we used to do 100 and we might cut it back for 15.
I
Because
mean,
Few
in
years ago.
in the last few years, not only have the revenues been up, but also we've short staffed. Right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we haven't had as much, unfortunately, right, and we're still down one staff member. But, you know, Ben's been really working to, you know, spend some of that, just put in some vending machines up here that will help. You know, with just different food options for students and,
We can spend that on food service equipment too, correct?
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
That's kind of.
And the state, the DOE, when
also
they do
grants.
their food service audits, you know, we are told, you know, that rather emphatically that we need to spend more money.
Yeah.
And get that amount down. So I think this might be a year where we might want to, we should talk to Ben, but maybe consider pausing that allocation. But the thing is, then it's hard to add it back in because then that's a impact to taxes. So you just need to think about that. Maybe another reduction perhaps, or something to think about.
Could we take some of that theoretically and create a new reserve fund that was like food service equipment or something like that?
It's already restricted anyway for that, for those type purposes. So you already are
Well, would it-
allowed to, so there's no.
Would it there be positive in making it look like you were spending it now?
If you, that you were spending it down or that
Right.
you were setting aside.
Well, if
Yes,
we were-
absolutely
if we were
positive
being-
to be spending it down and using it, but
Right, but if
But-
we were being pressured to reduce that balance and we took some and put it in food service equipment reserve, it would look like we were reducing the balance, right?
yeah.
And I imagine that's just for in school.
What's it, but it's already restricted now. It's, I mean, it's already restricted and you can just internally do it.
I don't think you're allowed to set up a reserve for that.
No, I'm just
No.
saying it's already, you could
You have certain
internally
things.
set it, you know. Have a plan for that, right? But it's not gonna reflect on there or anything.
And that restricted fund is probably targeted just to in school lunch and breakfast. It does not cover, for example, sports concessions, food.
You know, one way to do that would be to take the amount that we're dumping into the food service, the 50,000, and dump that into a capital reserve.
That's a good idea.
Yes,
that
yeah,
would
I mean,
keep
which
it-
you can use it
That would-
anywhere.
That would keep it in an equipment line, but also hit our food service.
Right.
That's
Or we could just move it into
budget
regular
impact is
reserve.
to do a one-time
Capital.
offset.
Right, that's what I'm saying, regular
Yeah.
capital reserve, but instead of.
Because typically that's where equipment has been purchased. If a large piece of equipment does come out of your facilities maintenance budget,
I'd rather-
anyway,
I'd
typically.
do that, just not
Yeah.
fund it, because then if we do have to go put it back in
Right.
2 or 3 years from now, that
Right.
it's far more difficult. So if we
Yeah.
just move it over, and if we have to, just move it back.
One of the, it seems like a major problem with food, and we are short staffed, and that's why we can't deliver on food. And so if we do that thinking towards equipment, does that limit us in terms of what we really need to do is paying higher wages, getting more people in there? Like, to actually staff, does that restrict it?
Well, wages is a
It's a
contractual.
contractual, we
decision, not
can't increase the wage.
necessary.
Unilaterally.
Well, I mean, I think that's gonna happen, or somehow we need more staff in there, and so if staffing is the main shortage. Like, if thinking we need to put in the equipment, is that gonna make us unable to staff in the future when we're able to recruit?
Do you want me to
I'm not
answer?
really
I'm
following
following, I
that.
think
I
I'm
mean,
following what
Yeah.
you're saying, but it's not that the food service would still have plenty of money to be able to do that if we were able to do that. We just wouldn't dump more from our budget into food service, but they'd still have plenty of money to do what they needed to do. So instead of taking it out of our budget, we would just set it aside in a different spot, but they still have plenty of money in food service.
So, yeah, I guess I'm just saying that extra money, we were talking about earmarking it for equipment in some sense, which I didn't fully follow, and I guess I'm wondering, does that mean if we do that, it can't be turned into staff?
I don't think it's either or, because the budget is so flush right now in food service that
Right.
they're not budget restricted.
You're still seeing a net positive in this.
And I just heard today that we're getting another 1,700 from the federal fund.
Oh, yeah, that last federal, there's more, federal subsidy coming to food service, one last little, not a lot.
I was thinking 1,910, but just more money, more revenue, specifically for food service.
Any other questions for Craig? Well, thank you, and thank you to Lynn and team for, the great work to prepare for this and work all year long. We appreciate the partnership with Craig and the team.
Likewise. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd just like to second thanking Lynn. I know people in this town may have gotten used to getting clean reports, but those of us been on the board for a while know that that's not a given. I can remember times when this district didn't know its cash position to $1 million. That's pretty Lynn, just to be clear, but and it wasn't the only district like that. So we should be very grateful in this town for the precision and the correctness with which our finances are executed. Thank you.
No pressure to say.
Okay, back to the regular agenda. So next up we have reports. We'll start with direct reports. You want to go first, Lisa?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Actually, today I'm going to share a little bit of information about our social work team. I think Jake was the one who asked about it at the last meeting. So, or maybe it was Mark. Oh, so anyway, thank you, Kevin. So my social workers compiled some information, and so far this year we've had 28 new referrals. I don't think there's been a day or there's been a week that I haven't received at least a couple referrals. It's just, coming from all schools. I think, mental health concerns as they are all over the place, and the lack of finding therapists in the area. I mean, even parents are kind of coming to us to see if there's anything that we can help them out with. So BJ is the one that we hired through special education, BJ Bowden. Her caseload right now is at 49, which the limit is 50. But she just got a big heart and does what she can to fit kids in. She's pretty creative. She's also seeing groups. She sees them in all 3 buildings. She's also has a core group that meets twice a week, and that's just been very effective for students, just making them aware of resources that are out of school, and just helpful overall, just allowing kids that time to have a safe place to talk. Kelly's current caseload, and Kelly is our person through Acadia, is at 31. She sees mostly students through their insurance, and it takes a little bit longer to kind of get them going. So She has, at this point, we've got 9 cases or 10 on a wait list, and those are all regular education students at this time. We can't really put our special education students on a wait list if it's part of their plan. But we get them in as quickly as we can. Erin is our does case management for us through Acadia. And she serves 16 families. She's actually dismissed 9 cases due to either meeting their goals or graduating. She's getting ready at this point to move on to something else in her professional career, and it has been prepping her replacement for the past couple of months. So that's good. Just a lot, I think a lot of really good things happening. You guys spoke about the Yellow Tulip Project a little earlier, and I'm not sure if this came directly, if this was where the idea came from. I know that it's had a lot of push and drive through BJ. Definitely, this is like a personal something she really believes in and supports, and that's just increasing awareness of mental health issues and demystifying or destigmatizing things that or thoughts that go with mental health. So there's just so much going on. We've got kids that are being seen in advisory groups, both at the high school and at OMS. It just really pleased with the work that we have happening.
Lisa, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You asked me what else Yellow Tulip was doing, and BJ particularly. So I just want to let you guys all know that she and the Yellow Tulip group continue to grow in number. She started it with just 1 student, but now it's growing. And the thing that the Yellow Tulip group does, as far as I can tell, it's most impactful is just, as Lisa just said, spreading the word that mental illness is here and that you're not alone, and making it more okay and normal to talk about it. And BJ does that in her groups. I participated in a few of the core PLP meetings this past week, and that was echoed there as well. And so in her Yellow Tulip project, she's also doing different activities with the kids. She's working hard with the whole student committee that we started up, run by a teacher a couple months ago now, and really helps with activities in advisory programming to just raise student spirits and have some fun times together as classmates and with their staff. So she's really taking that on, and I agree, it's definitely something she's passionate about, but she's growing that passion with our school, which is pretty amazing.
And I mean, all kinds of concerns are being covered. I don't think I've ever seen so many students struggling with anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation as I have this year. The needs are just so significant. And it's nice to know that we have supports readily available for people. Any questions about that?
So you have 10 on a wait list, and so does that kind of reflect what you're saying, this higher than usual number you're seeing, or has it traditionally been a wait list?
There's been a wait list, but it hasn't been this long. Sometimes the wait list is just a paperwork issue with Acadia. It's a short wait, but other times at this point, the wait list is longer than it usually is. They're very good at kind of prioritizing mental health concerns. If we have a student who is voicing suicidal ideation, then they move to the front of the class very quick. So.
And the wait list is with the Acadia contracting?
No, BJ's been great. She's through, she's funded through special education, but she's picked up our general education students when she can. She, whoever has a space we'll pick up the student. And it, it depends if they're able to be seen in a group, then it might be something that, we can pull them in a little bit more quickly. But if they require individualized therapy, then we've got to have a spot open up. Really, I think the only one that has spots right now would be Acadia. And again, that part is the paperwork piece. It takes a while for them to open through their insurance. At times they'll start seeing kids prior to opening, and they'll bill us for those services. Those will be their billable hours. But it's pretty tight. And our Arcadia person also has some offsite responsibilities. So, her schedule is a little bit more limited than BJ, who's just, here when the doors open and goes home when the doors close. She sees kids, and I think they probably both do, just for convenience sake, but they see kids before and after school, just to be able to fit them in.
Well, to think that last year we had BJ part-time, right? So last year our capacity was 25, presumably, for her caseload, since she was here part-time. And now, in just this year, we filled her to capacity in that time. Just, speaks to the demand that Lisa's talking about.
And I think people are, most of the referrals come from guidance offices. And I think people are seeing our social workers in the building. So it prompts them to issue a referral a little bit more quickly than they may have in the past. I think a lot of time in the past was spent trying to help them find outside services. And for the last couple of years, that's pretty much been to no avail, unless they're doing, something on Zoom or, and a lot of folks, that's just not a way that they want to receive mental health supports, understandably. So.
Lisa, if I may, also our attendance at staff meetings and other staff gatherings, team meetings, and it's like that's the other part of it, right? That BJ's taking on in particular, right? And other staff see her as part of the team, so that really helps with the delivery of services. Right,
and she has a good background in PBIS, so I know she was very excited about getting on that team with your folks at the middle school.
That's right. She's a regular part of those meetings as well. Yep.
Yeah.
What I also will say about the Acadia staff is they really help. We've unfortunately had a couple students that have ended up needing hospital support, and they are a great conduit and really have supported us a great deal in helping the student return to school or finding out what's going on for them when sometimes that can be difficult for us. And so they're a huge support in that regard as well. So in a lot of ways that we've mentioned, it's been really huge having all three of them here.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on this topic? Thanks, Lisa. Did you have more?
No.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Go on to Director of Learning, Susan.
Good evening. I think from my written report, board members can see there's a lot of curriculum work going on right now with health, math, Wabanaki studies, and technology. And I have just been so impressed with the way our teachers and others have tackled those challenges. I would use the term a complicated challenge as one that is hard to figure out, but if you have the right technique and the right approach and enough time, you can get it solved. Sort of like doing a middle school schedule, I think, is a very complicated challenge. Things that are more complex, challenges that are more complex often don't have the right answer in front of you. It kind of unfolds as things go along, and curriculum work can be really messy and more of a complex challenge. I think if people were just taking an approach of take what we've done in the past in our old curriculum map and transpose it to the new curriculum maps and add a few things in, that would be complicated. But people are really taking a complex approach and thinking about what what kinds of experiences do we want our students to have in math? And what do our kids at high school really need for health instruction? And how does Wabanaki Studies fit into any curriculum or content area? And where do our Wabanaki students see themselves in our classrooms and our curriculum? So I've been really impressed with the work that's been going on there. We also, our DEI work is well underway. Subcommittees have been meeting, and I'm looking forward to Thursday afternoon's conversation with the entire group. We've invited folks that have not necessarily been part of the DEI team in the past, but have been active on those subcommittees to come and join the conversation. So I'm looking forward to seeing where folks are now and what the next steps will be. In professional development on January 13th, there were a lot of things going on. In addition to the curriculum work, a lot of the schools worked on SSPs. I think you heard about that from the principals last year. Lots of special ed trainings going on as well on January 13th. And that was on a Friday. And on the Monday, Meredith and I met with Tanya Scaniers to start talking about March 17th and what that district-wide professional development day could look like and how we want that to take shape. And Meredith Higgins and I meet with Tanya again shortly. And then there's the budget process. It's been a learning experience for me a bit on how things are done here in RSU 26, and just thinking about what we've spent money on this year and what the needs are for next year as far as budget and courses too. So those have been some great conversations as people have put together proposals and ideas and are solidifying those as we start to move some of them forward.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Just a short one. You mentioned you're really impressed with changes or visions in health, math, and Wabanaki studies. Is there anything you'd like to brag about that you were particularly delighted about? If not, that's fine.
Well, I'm particularly delighted about the willingness of people to bring new ideas to the table and to challenge each other on those in general. And I think that's there've been really healthy conversations. I'm really pleased with starting the math conversations around what do we really want our experiences for our students to be like based on what we know as professionals and what we experienced as learners, whether it was our young learners or ourselves as adult learners, and then looking at the research to show what works there too. So, and then just the willingness for the high school staff is where we started with the Wabanaki Studies area, and people really thinking about different ways that our students can see themselves in our curriculum and how we can all benefit from that. There was not a closed-mindedness. It was math teachers talking about how could this play out in math, and some real creative ideas there, and lots of needs there too, I think, identified.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Move on to the superintendent report.
I have a couple things just to report on. First, I want to announce a resignation. We received a resignation from Daniel Perkins, TAC manager, and also serves as an ed tech at ASA. So Daniel will wrap up February 3rd in those roles. He will continue on with the chauffeur role that he has. So we're working today, beginning work on a transition plan to figure out the bridge, and we plan to post a job advertisement shortly. Lisa, we have this standing ed tech ad out, so that's part is just, Lisa's always on the hunt for ed techs. Unfortunately, we're in that position, but it's mainly for the PAC manager. We'll be seeking candidates.
Do we have anyone in the interim who's trained on that equipment in there that can fill in?
That's what we're working on right now. Working on that transition plan. We have some people who are trained to do certain parts of it, and we're going to make sure we have people who are available to be able to work on, supporting events in space. So, too early to really comment on specifics. We've been talking a lot in our emergency response team about our systems for learning of threats and alerting to emergency situations. And we've been looking into some different tools to help us with that. We've had a couple of meetings with vendors for some different tools. One of which was in the media last week that Bangor is just implementing. We had talked with that vendor actually earlier last week. We're looking at some other tools, but we just feel like that's something we need to consider as a district to augment, you know, our current practices and systems. Some of our counselors went to, they've been working on threat assessment for several years, or threat assessment response. And one of the things that came out of that is we're in really good shape with our protocols and procedures, but we really need an anonymous report system to kind of complete the recommendations to respond fully to what the recommendations are around threat assessment. So those are some things we're looking into, and they're probably going to show up in budget in part. And I just want you to know, you know, a little bit of background about those before we get into budget time. I think we found an anonymous reporting system. We found one that doesn't have too much cost. They don't charge anything. They just require some activities at the school level that will have some cost with them. But we're still vetting it and determining if that's the right approach for us with that side of things. And the emergency response alert system is the more costly. It's definitely a costly system depending on which one. So more to come on those. So.
Did I read it correctly that the one that Bangor went with is 400,000 a year? Is that
I didn't read the article because I knew what it was, and so I didn't seek out the article. I would be surprised if it was that much.
I read it, but now I'm
maybe with all of their buildings and with implementation costs, because year one is higher. For us, that system quoted out was around 36,000 for year one, and along with implementation. For them, I think, you know, we work 2 buildings and they have probably 10 buildings. So maybe.
I think I've heard about the system a little bit at a spruce meeting they were talking about it.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have it as well.
Yeah.
Are you at liberty or comfortable, like just giving, because if I'm correct, it's something they wear, right?
Yeah, it's a badge system. Yeah, I'm comfortable. I mean, it was in the media, so it's a badge system where you know, there are buttons, you would wear it like behind your ID badge, and there are buttons to alert, and it sets off an alarm system in the school.
And there's certain codes, right?
Right, yeah. And, you know, there are other systems, we talked about this today, emergency response, that work differently, not through that kind of button system, but are more app-based systems that offer more services in the application that, you know, is an alternative to that. So we're just weighing different options right now and trying to learn more. So probably, you know, I guess one approach with that is to seek out a grant to try to support initial implementation and then budget for ongoing costs. That just means we, you know, would have to delay implementation of it until we can find a grant.
It's a 5-year deal, cost of the department 409,000. So maybe that's over 5.
Yeah, so they're rolling costs. So our 5-year cost would be like 140,000 with that system. But we'll definitely bring you more as we learn more. I just want to let you know that we're, you know, not standing still on that. We're looking and researching options.
It's the, I'm sure there's been a conversation, but the trade-off between, you know, obviously fast response in a real situation is really critical, life-saving literally, but you know, false alarms and increased you know, twitchiness has a mental health cost for students too. I'm just curious what the trade-off that is.
Well, I think you want a system that you know, you have to be pretty deliberate about doing it. And to me, that's a little bit of a risk with the badge, although the way to do the ultra, you know, intruder, you know, active shooter threat seems to be, it would be hard to accidentally set it off with these badges. And I think that's the same question with practicing drills and other, you know, preparedness activities that we do. You know, what I think is we have room for improvement to get to bring up the level of response time that I feel like doesn't tip over to compromise, you know, mental health in any way that's not offset by the improved, you know, sense of security. You know, currently there's just, we need a better response system to get more active response, but it'll take a lot of education with staff about how to use it, when to use it, because essentially it allows anyone in the school to call a lockdown, which is an important life-saving measure that's been shown in, you know, case after case of active shooter threats to be an important response element.
Yeah, at the same time, I mean, I guess one question I have is how the system interacts with social media, or if it's just a direct response to things observed in schools, because as we've learned in the state over the last year, social media has to be, you know, pretty carefully evaluated with some pretty savvy training.
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of education of staff for sure.
I mean, I would assume it's more direct threats.
Yeah, I mean, they can also be for like a medical need, or, you know, an elopement, you know, a child's run away, or, you know, behavior, like a restraint is needed. There are other applications for it that are more day in, day out applications that could be helpful. Right now we use, you know, radios with staff who are more likely to need them, but we don't have radios on every staff member.
To me, the system is described, just again, knowing nothing other than what was written in that BDN article, did sound useful.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is a useful application. I think our conversation is just around, is there a tool that does more things for it that can also do that, and maybe in a different way? I mean, one of the other systems also does messaging and alerts, so you can get more contextualized information when you're reporting a threat or an active threat, and also can help all the way through. They, you know, this one package advertises, you know, we can help you from the point of threat all the way to reunification with, you know, a messaging tool with staff. And so just considering the best approach for us where we are. But I think I feel like that's an important step for us to take. And when I reflect on, you know, our situation we had several years ago now, I think, you know, perhaps that tool could have really helped delayed, you know, communication to the other building and getting out information, because, you know, I have to get into a computer, you know, get to my school messenger and, you know, go through, I don't know, probably a couple of minutes of work to just get to where I can compose the message to go out. And then with those systems, if it had an alert capability, it can, you know, be a lot faster. The other thing, just to let you know, we did have, we've had 2 meetings with UTC since we last talked about calendar. I plan on bringing a calendar draft to the next board meeting. We think we're close. We were 7 days off when we all compared our calendars. And we were an outlier on one of those days. And Central was an outlier on another day, with us having a day that no one else had, and Central had the same. So we both you know, agreed to make an adjustment on those 2 days. It was one of the December days that we were trying to build in as a holiday, or, you know, day off from school before we break for the longer Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah break. And Central, it was a start of school issue. So when they fix that, we're within 5. However, we and Hamden need to align our January teacher workshop day to make this work. And so the superintendent from Hamden and I need to talk about that and figure out how we can do that to meet both of our needs. So hopefully we can come to an agreement, and I'll be able to bring a draft for next week. You know, good work at the regional level to come together on that. You know, districts were about 50-50 around Thanksgiving, how that week was handled. So we just agreed that that's just going to be at a similar time. We're about 50-50 on the Friday before the release for December and late December. And our start days are a little Bangor and Old Town don't start until after Labor Day, so that costs us a day.
I was gonna say, I mean, the Old Town, it seems to me, just based on every year Old Town start is out there, and so.
And Bangor.
Well, why aren't they calling? And why is everybody so concerned about a day that we have and a day that Central has, when Old Town consistently chooses to start out? I don't care. It's not my contract.
Yeah, they can't. They don't. You know, it's in the contract, so I can get it out now.
I mean, I'm not saying that we should be optimal about this, but what would happen if we just said no? We're not changing.
Yeah.
things.
I mean, we could.
Well, we've been out of alignment. We're rarely in alignment. We're more than
Right. I mean, I feel like we could have taken that approach. I felt like with us being the only district taking 2 days before the weekend, and there were other districts taking just the 1 day and then the weekend in late December, that it was.
Yeah, no, I'm fine in this case. It kind of irks me that Old Town consistently gets to get away with that.
Well, it's not just Old Town.
Well, Bangor.
Yeah.
Bangor gets to get away with whatever.
Yeah, what Old Town does is they don't take any workshop days throughout the year. They structure it really differently, except for the 17th of March. I think that might be the only one they take. And they do all of their workshop days in advance. And they have after school time once a week throughout the year. That's their workshop time, their PD time. So once they get started though, they catch up with the rest of us. And there aren't dissimilar days. So.
The reason we don't do that model, or
we tried that model, didn't we?
We did, and it just felt like we couldn't get as much done having such small chunks of time.
What about the first week in January, back to school in January? So everybody, I mean, or different fingers, like. So
I can't hear. Say that again.
So like the first week back, what was it, last week, where we all come back from break, have a half day and then no Friday, and it's like it's back and forth and telling parents.
So the first week back, I think January 1st falls on a Monday. Everyone's coming back on Tuesday.
But I mean, then we take that Friday. I know Bangor didn't.
I think this year, that's what Hamden and RSU 26 need to work out and come to alignment on, where we're taking that full teacher workshop day in January. And I mean, we just talked about as a board putting the early release on the second Wednesday of every month. It was actually the week after we came back. Yeah, because it was the second Wednesday that we had the early release, because we wanted to do it a consistent day of the month each month.
Some people didn't want to do it.
Right. Yes. Sorry. Didn't mean to misrepresent you. Yeah. And where we put that January day is tricky to accomplish the goals we want to accomplish with it and not bump up against, you know, the start of a new semester for the high school and exam week. And so it's not ideal where it was placed. I understand that. So, and we need to now work with Hamden that gives us a little less flexibility. So we felt like putting it where we did, at least put it next to a long holiday weekend so that families could do something with, you know, the Friday and then the Monday for the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday.
And
that was our thinking on where we put it.
Am I correct in saying we're getting more pressure from the state this year to be in alignment than we had in the past? What is the penalty for misalignment? I mean, it's kind of like the audit thing, right?
Yeah, I imagine.
Right.
I think it's one of those areas where no one's really sure there is a penalty, or if it's just they speak loudly to you each year, more loud each year.
I mean, I do agree with it's beneficial for the students from
it is.
You know, all the sending students, it is beneficial to get it alive, so they're not missing UTC opportunities. Classes.
So I hope to have a draft for you next meeting, and we can have some more conversation then, and have something in front of you to consider. That's all for items not a strategic plan. You want to just jump into that?
Yeah, that's next.
Yeah, so I took what I presented to you last time and you know, considered the discussion. We had some discussion at curriculum committee meeting and brought back just a document that's a little more fleshed out. And the three main changes here are to one, to shift the language to vision of a learner as opposed to vision of a graduate. I think there's, you know, broad, do you have that in the strategic?
Yep.
Yeah. Broad agreement that, you know, the graduate language, certainly no one feels, you know, like that's something we have to go with. So shifting it, we talked about student or learner. I still think we could go either way on that. And I think the group that convenes can have that discussion about where they think it might, how it might best be communicated. So I've just used learner for now. So I've updated that. I also delineated how a stakeholder team might be put together following our conversation last meeting, thinking about trying to think about size. So I put that forward for your consideration. And that's something that, you know, is one of the first decisions we really need to make, because to get the process started, we really need to begin to fill these roles. And I'd like to begin work on that in February to get, you know, a stakeholder team perhaps formed by our projected start date of perhaps March. So we talked about having all 5 board members there. I think it's important to have the principals there and the 2 directors involved with instruction. School staff representatives, I went with 5. And the reason I chose a number like 5, it certainly can shift a bit, is when I think about the types of staff, I'm trying to think about how we can have enough staff to involve diverse perspectives there. Like thinking about, you know, special educator and regular educator and someone who teaches maybe a special area and someone from each level and maybe support staff. So trying to fill roles with people who fill a lot of different types of roles within the district.
So that would include one person from each school in that category?
Well, one person from each school for sure overall, but it might not be a special educator from each school. We would just make sure that one person is a special educator overall, and then make sure we had, you know, someone who teaches maybe in a special area or the arts. And then, you know.
But the school staff representatives, that's a category that we make sure we check.
Yeah.
The school, one from each school.
One for each school is another part of the composition I think would be important within that number of 5.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Student representatives, I put it at 2. That's kind of what we went with before when we did larger search committees, to either think of having 2 high school students or a high school student and a middle school student to fill those roles. You know, we typically we had really good luck in the DEI work to have a couple of really committed students. And, you know, the key is finding a student who can commit the time and who's comfortable in that kind of atmosphere, being really engaged with the process. Parent representatives, thinking 3, since we also have, you know, 4 parent representatives and board members as well. And trying in those 3 to make sure we have, you know, intentionally 1 from each building in that composition. And then we talked about perhaps having other community or business representatives on the committee. And I'm not sure if 2 is the right number for that, or what the right number is. So
what is that like?
Well, just thinking about folks out in the community that may be employers, people who employ individuals, or maybe someone from the university, or someone who is engaged with, you know, our students in a way outside of, you know, school, to offer just different perspectives. So something Brian and I were talking about, especially when we were framing it as a graduate context, thinking about preparing students for what's next after they are done with K-12. But, you know, we can have more discussion about is that the right approach to take, because, you know, there are a lot of people who wear different roles, you know, from board members to parents who also, you know, can serve dual perspectives on the committee potentially. But that's part of why I'm bringing it to you for a question and discussion about your thoughts on that. The last thing I added to this was just trying to map out kind of how we might move through month to month working on this. So proposing we try to get the team formed, get commitments, get you know, a couple of initial meetings scheduled by March, and begin our meetings in April, and pause for probably July and August, and then reconvene in the fall and September. So feedback, questions.
Timeline certainly makes sense to me based on kind of what we discussed last time, but also kind of our natural kind of work flow here. So I think the timeline was great. Team composition makes sense to me. I mean, it's a big committee, but as we discussed last time, this has to be on the bigger side, I think. So that means we'll just have to accept a little bit of unworthiness, but I don't know if there's any way around that. I'm fine with it.
I think it looks good. I do think having some community employer representation is a good idea. I think if we were to go back and look at most of those vision of student committees, they probably did have that on it. I don't feel like there's a big difference between 22 and 24, but I do also think we might be able to get some overlap parents and board members. So I don't know, but I don't have a super strong compulsion to do that, because there's a big difference between 22 and 24. A little bit back and forth on the schedule. Like Mark said, it does align with the board work schedule pretty well. Sometimes, I don't know, there's different strategies on scheduling, right? We often slip. And if we slip with this schedule, we're into, you know, a whole new school year. So part of me is tempted to say we should compress the schedule and see how that goes. But there are other people who say it's better to have a realistic, you know, schedule up front. So don't have a strong opinion on that either, but there's at least a part of me that's thinking we should, you know, try a more compressed schedule. Like for example, DI, I think we ended up switching 3 or 4 months. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I tried in a couple of months to offer, you know, 2 or 3 months kind of like as we got into that shaping a first draft. I felt like that's probably going to take a couple of months, but it might, you know, lead into beginning work on action strategy. So overall, that might take 3 months. You know, but I agree with you. I'm just not sure how to solve that. I would rather not set up a schedule that I don't think is realistic.
I also worry just a little bit about keeping continuity of participation. over 16 months or whatever that is. Wonder if, the really heavy lifting is this period in May, June. That's right. The committee builds a shared vision of what we're doing. So I think that takes time. And then in the September, October, November period, which is what we're getting the public input and then turning that into the big bullet points is really heavy lifting. Some of the later points, I wonder if we don't want to think about pushing that more into some subcommittees and admin and some of those kinds of things that might let those go a little bit faster.
Yeah, I guess I had envisioned that we would probably divide this group into some subcommittees as we started working on action strategies and success criteria, that we might divide and have groups, branching off to meet more frequently in between, to kind of like we're doing right now for DEI, and how we did in DEI. Actually, we divided off and worked that way. But were you thinking, so what does that do to the time frame? Like, allows us to get through, you think maybe by March instead of getting into April, or you think it speeds us up?
I think the focus areas and the action strategies so the November, December, that strikes me as something that could be compressed if it was done by a smaller group, then the buy-in at that level of detail might not be as critical. And then, yeah, the success criteria. Those are the two things that strike me as that, if we try and do it with 24 people, those things are going to take all the time. Let's put down there. But those might be things, smaller group that knows the district more intimately. Mostly thinking that and team might be able to do first cuts up that could go quicker. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know that I have a strong opinion about that.
Well, I think probably developing success criteria wouldn't take 2 months. I think that's where we could shave off a month, especially if we're working in subcommittees. I think we just have to try to map this out with folks and get it on people's calendars early, because what I found with DEI, it just became a calendaring nightmare, right?
I think also if we're up front that, hey, we envision this at this point, the end of 16 months, letting people know up front about that.
The other thing we could do, I feel like it would be really nice to finalize this by the end of March before March and April are really busy months for the board.
Yeah, that's really where I'm coming from. It's not so much that I think that this is, an excessively long plan. It's just that I think budget completely takes over everybody's attention, both board and admin, come especially March but especially April when there's board turnover potentially in March. I don't know, but it may not be realistic to keep that March deadline. I don't think we have to decide now. We can get into it, and if it's going well, we can push it up, and if it's not going well, we can stick to schedule.
The first item on the agenda is forming the team, and we can go ahead and do that by giving people a rough idea of what the timeline looks like, but nothing has to be finalized. You can just give them at least a rough idea of what you're buying, what you're signing on.
Yeah, we tell people 16 months, but it turns out to be 13. Nobody's going to be unhappy.
I wouldn't.
So the last item, I guess I'd like to explore more. I definitely get the idea of community partners, admissions folks from my university or community organizers. With business reps, I guess I'd want them to be sufficiently general, trying to think about who you might have had in mind that would have broad enough advice to help shape the outcomes of 100 students going in 30 different directions, versus something more civic oriented from the town council or to be more community oriented in terms of giving back, or what did you have in mind for those?
Well, you know, I guess I was thinking about, you know, thinking about who is a large employer in our area that could offer, you know, what are the things that they're looking for in workforce? What are the qualities they're looking for generally in employees? You know, an organization like Northern Light has employees in so many different, you know, realms of work and professional and focus that, you know, someone from their leadership or their HR could maybe add just context for people thinking about the world that students are heading out into that, you know, might help. I think sometimes in these roles, it's easy, it's good to hear from that perspective about, you know, what they hope to see in future applicants. So it's definitely a framework that's probably more a secondary, like, you know, high school of thought to think about, you know, those kinds of perspectives. But I think it's an important perspective to consider. And you know, I guess I feel like we have a lot of university, you know, perspectives on the committee. So I'm not sure I would be thinking about adding another, you know, like university, but maybe something from like the technical center realm, because I'm not sure that those students, that those pathways are as well represented in conversations.
Yeah, I mean, those are some of my smart thoughts. I mean, the numbers fluctuate, but very broadly, half the kids go on to some tertiary education, whether it's community college or university, and half go pretty much directly into an employment. So I think it's important to represent, and you know, especially with the board composition, if we're professors on the board. So I think getting those other half of the kids represented is important. I think large employers, so Northern Light would probably be my first choice. I think, you know, bank or savings might be a possibility. I don't think somebody's
like Chinbro.
Yeah. What's that?
Somebody like Chinbro.
Yeah, right. A large construction or engineering firm. A lot of employment around here. So I mean, definitely wouldn't want to, you know, promise it just a single industry, but big employer that cuts across a lot of industries. I can imagine somebody from like Rotary Club. You know,
Chamber of Commerce.
What's that? Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, who represents, you know, lots of employers, might make sense. Not sure that I see the town council having a particular, but I do hear the civic. Don't have a specific suggestion, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're turning out, ultimately we're turning out future employees, right? So we should probably have a perspective what employers are looking for in graduates.
I guess for my mind going when you first did this, but you said so much from university, but like I was thinking like an education researcher or therapist, psychologist, someone that like in pedagogical literature understands like totally different perspective, I suppose, like them. And that's maybe more, yeah. So someone who can give an outside expert opinion on like education pedagogy and stuff like that. But that's, I feel like that's often the thing that would be helpful in this conversation. Maybe we have a lot of that in-house, but maybe there's actually some folks that are more immersed in expertise in that over there. And could help guide some of the, what does it mean to raise a human being and develop their mind and come on the workforce or whatever course they're going on to. That would be my.
I mean, be interesting to find out, but I wouldn't jump to assumptions for example, I would bet somebody who comes from the business perspective would put a lot of value in social emotional learning, collaborative and team cooperation, some of those kinds of things. So
Yeah, I agree. I get it. The question is like, are they gonna, I mean, we got to think more about what the strategic vision of a learner is, but are they gonna know what that looks like at these ages to create that outcome that they're looking for? And like, where are the guides and directions that as a learner, you know, I mean, it's one thing to say you want someone to be able to do something, it's another thing to train them in how to do that.
And I think that's kind of our job though, right? Is the committee, like, we're just looking for the perspective of what the employer's looking for. I wouldn't expect the employer to know how to create it.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is I have lots of ideas and we all have ideas about how they create things, but I
mean, we will have a lot of people with, you know, advanced degrees, master's degrees in education who are on the committee. So I don't know that maybe we benefit from getting another person with that background and maybe, you know, a little deeper into the research side of things, but maybe not too. It's not obvious to me.
I am hearing something that may not be said, something I'm just picking out of thin air. And we do have a lot of folks, you know, even present right now with mental health background and that perspective as well. I mean, what I'm hearing for whatever reason is I drew 3 arrows on my piece of paper here thinking about multiple paths, perspectives. And so crafting an educational vision that's consistent with multiple outcomes. You're going to Chinborough, or you're going into the Cornell or whatever. And then thinking about things like, say, mental health, you know, how do we, and we do work on this, you know, with social emotional learning, but making sure our vision includes this idea of how to live a long and healthy life while you're working and you're pursuing education, and things like how do you develop healthy relationships and communication. And I'm not, you know, saying these all have to be equal or anything, but, you know, that sort of whole person phenomenon. When we imagine what it is to live a happy and healthy life, part of that is material security, right? And then there's all these other things of being able to deal with conflict and to deal with failure and to be flexible to change paths. And again, I do think we have a lot of people maybe already tapped on this list to bring that experience, admins and teachers and stuff. But I'm also thinking back to you know, Bo and Bowden, no. BJ, yeah. These perspectives of, because I'm thinking partly because I'm burnt out in my own professional career. So when you reach that point in life and you are just burned out, you know, wouldn't it be great if our students are like, I know what to do. I know what to do now, or they prevent burnout. And I didn't. No, stop talking.
I think that's getting sort of what I was saying too. And maybe there are enough in-house resources, but like the psychologist, therapist sort of perspective, or like what is, or whatever, emotional skills, and how much of that is trained through what we all have in education in school versus like, is there an outside perspective that's more immersed in that?
I mean, I think it's an important dimension, and I'd be open to external suggestions, but my first thought is our school counselors. We have wonderful school counselors in this district, and that's their core job and function. And, you know, maybe that's a category we need to make sure gets represented in the school staff.
We also have some admin that have some pretty extensive background.
We certainly do
in that area too, right? So.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, some of what I'm hearing is, you know, figuring out how we accomplish the strategic plan. And I think that that's an important part of the scoping of what the work is and what the work isn't, right? So I think in terms of, you know, developing a program that helps students, you know, understand how to have a life that is focused on wellness and, you know, well-being physically, mentally, emotionally, is the work of curriculum and instruction on that and professional development for staff. So I don't think we're going to be working on what that is going to look like necessarily. I think we'll identify, you know, gap areas probably when we're doing kind of an analysis against our vision and where are we to really just outline, you know, some priority areas that need focused attention and work over the next 5 years. So I don't think we have to have all the answers. I just think we need to know enough to identify what's important and to kind of assess current reality against that. So I think that we'll have to continue to remind ourselves of what's the scope of work, because it like in DEI, it's easy to go down rabbit holes, right, with this kind of work, because everyone sitting around the table is passionate and cares about it. And so we're gonna just have to all remind one another about where this work is focused and how to keep us on that track as we go through it. So I think as I'm listening to the conversation, I feel like we're kind of thinking about things that maybe are beyond the scope of what actually we're going to be creating here. But it's been helpful to hear kind of these perspectives about what might be the best way to build a committee. And, you know, some of this is, as we think about that community business representatives, you know, I think we could go a number of different directions, and probably some of it's going to be dependent on who we can get to join us in this work. But I wonder, I know that organizations have, like employers, large employers have you know, departments focused on, you know, wellness and employee health. And, you know, I think those are perspectives that some of those groups can also bring us about how, you know, that's promoted in their workplace and how we might learn from that. So I think these are good considerations to, you know, keep thinking about as we design this team. But I like the idea of a school counselor as maybe a designated spot on the team, because they are really kind of a niche, you know, role in the larger school staff. Do you support the idea of having, you know, someone from workforce generally, like, you know, representing workforce?
The organization.
Yeah, like in one of these community business representatives. Like someone from like the Northern Light example, or from, you know, yeah. Yeah, sorry.
I didn't know if you were invoking an organization.
No.
I like Mark's Chamber light, because it's not only the workforce, but it's the trades as well.
Right.
Which is a
Yeah.
Is Kevin, you know, right? From
UTC.
Yeah.
I agree. It'd be nice to have a perspective of a non-collegiate path employer.
I mean, I think, you know, if we go in that direction, which I'm supportive of, as Meredith pointed out, it's also who we can get to come on board with this. I mean, Northern Light is the biggest employer in Scott County by a fair margin, and I suspect will still be the case even after their most recent kind of spinning off some stuff. I do know that they have been involved, not necessarily with this kind of effort at school, but they have pretty extensive community engagement involvement. Bangor Savings Bank also does.
What I like about Northern Light is they have employees from, you know, all realms of, you know, preparation and training, and from people who, you know, just were trained on the job to people who have, you know, MDs and beyond. So, and everywhere in between, and so many different services within, you know, that serve the organization. So but I'm not stuck on that. I just feel like, you know, something that offers a broad base perspective would be helpful, because I think we in school don't think about that as much as we should. Like, there are so many paths that our students might take in front of them. And so are we encouraging them to consider all of those options for what's next?
Right. I think when you look statistically, you know, some of the most rapidly growing areas include healthcare, IT, and trades. And you know, IT always usually involves a college degree first. first things you think about with healthcare, which is the doctors and nurses require a college or a community college degree, but the areas that are growing the most are home healthcare, nurse techs, these kinds of things, which are pre-college degree kind of, so kind of like what you were saying, but really feel like that covers a pretty broad spectrum. But yeah, I mean, so something that addresses the trades or healthcare, I think those are both the biggest and the fastest growing areas right now. So I think it makes a lot of sense to capture somebody from there. But as Mark and Meredith keep saying, we're gonna take whoever we can get probably in the end. So,
I'd probably rank order them, just thinking about the possibilities, Northern Light 1, Shinbo 2, and then maybe the Bangor area Chamber of Commerce 3, and see. Bangor Savings Bank, I think would probably be interested in participating, just that their kind of range of the workforce is a little more limited than Northern Light or Shinbo. I mean, Shinbo has the same range almost that Northern Light does, people with advanced degrees in engineering, down to people who are trained on the job, or people who are laborers, so they got a big range.
Are we saying get two, like one from each of those? That was two, there's another.
Well, I was kind of thinking about, the idea about wellness or civic mindedness or, service, like someone who I'm just not sure who that person might be.
I like this service or civic engagement.
You go to the Kiwanis Club, is pretty active in all the time. You can look at someone from like Maine, legal women voters, if you want to go more in the civic direction. And there's options out there.
So if you come up with a good idea on specifically names for that last category and affiliations, if you could send them my way, so I could begin working on, making a list of potential people to reach out to.
Geographically, looking within Penobscot, Orono, Bangor, what's your?
I think probably for someone to really be able to commit to us, probably, in the greater Bangor area. Otherwise, it would probably be hard for them to make a commitment to this word. I mean, we've talked a lot about the community business representatives. Do you think the rest of the list looks like what you would imagine this to need to look like?
Yes, well, for me at least.
Yeah. I think the school staff representatives are going to get pretty squeezed by the time we try and get somebody who's not a teacher and somebody who's a school counselor and all three. But hopefully we can make that all fit with 5.
Yeah, that's right. It depends on who the 5 are and that seems like the most ambiguous category. What that representation.
Yeah.
I think we've given some feedback on things we would like to see there. Is there other feedback on what we'd like to see there?
I'll throw wishes out there, they're free. Let's staring at school counselor with my note. Again, visit or health teachers, even if they're just consulted peripherally. I know that education happens here, but I think in schools, I'm guilty of this. We focus a lot on the brain, and then the body is what keeps the brain going. So I value things like healthy eating and physical education and lifelong fitness and health, especially given what's when knees creep these days. So I mean, and I'm not trying to suggest curriculum, but rather I know that in the future the strategic vision kind of will be a lot. We will align to it. And so part of our vision of a learner is also someone who it's a whole body kind of experience. Then probably that will affect choices that are made down the line. And I want our learners to be healthy and mobile and these kinds of things. Yeah. With just wishes.
Yeah. And all of our school counselors are also engaged with our health curriculum work and have a piece in that, but that's not to say that, you know, I think having someone who teaches that, you know, even more could offer more to the committee, but just, we can think about how we can serve multiple maybe perspectives with, you know, carefully,
Lots of hats.
yeah, organized.
Everybody's gonna have to be a multi-hatted person on this committee, but this is not addressing this plan, but just listen to the conversation tonight. You know, we had a benefit in the curriculum committee of having an update on the health curriculum. I think it might be beneficial for the board to hear about some of that work that's been happening with the health curriculum and the new things that are going into the health curriculum. So maybe that's something we could talk about for a future meeting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that both groups, both health and math, will have a presentation, right, with their products. We talked about that at the end of their work. So if we want to do that before then, certainly can.
I'm still trying to like see how we squeeze like sort of the creative arts, visual arts, and life science. When you're thinking of people and like creative writing, like the different modes of being, and each school into those.
You will be there too, so.
I've got everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think, you know, if we look across, like our principals, for example, they offer different parts of what you just said, you know, based on the breadth of their experience and their training and background teaching, so. And are involved in, you know, conversations with staff and students all the time as well. So I think we're not going to have every perspective possible on a committee like this, certainly, but I think we can check a lot of boxes. And, you know, we also will see, you know, which staff express interest and consider based on that how we can get the most, you know, diverse kind of perspectives and representation.
I mean, on some level, we're gonna have 12 people who work in the schools. And I think we just have to have some faith. They're bringing a lot of perspectives and lots of value of different parts of students. And lots of different expertise onto this committee too. It doesn't all have to come from outside of the district.
Good point.
Everybody happy with things as presented? Yes. And, you know, I think you expressed it well, Kevin, that wishes are free, but when the rubber hits the road, Mary's gonna have to get people to say yes. So I hope we're all prepared for that, not exactly matching. No,
I will be crushed. I will be crushed.
I will deliver the news gently.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Okay, staff nominations.
We don't have any.
Didn't see any. Okay, yep. So on to policies. These are all going to be presented as revisions. So the first policy is JJIF, which is the concussion policy. Obviously an increasingly important policy. I think maybe also a state required policy at this point in time. So the background on this policy is we put the first one in place. You got that, Mark, thanks. We put the first version of this policy in place a few years ago. And, you know, a lot of the science and a lot of the practice has changed since then. So this policy has been updated to basically incorporate the current best practice as reviewed by our athletic director and anybody else involved in that.
Athletic trainer.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically the people working on the stately have kind of updated this to capture current best practice. Athletic trainer and athletic directors. So there was a medical
And what's actually being done, what's described in the old policy is no longer what's done for baseline testing.
What is the update now?
What's that?
What is the update now? So
It's
So marked in red.
marked in red.
It's in
What's in the folder?
policy subfolder, the January 24th folder.
So this is the protocols for if a player is exposed to a concussion about, you know, pulling them out until they are fully recovered and things like that.
And the, you know, preliminary testing that has to be done to set baseline, training, communication with families about it.
So I would make a motion to go ahead and adopt policy JJIF as presented as a revision. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Okay, passes 5-0. Next up is policy JK, student discipline. This is a case where we had a policy. This is also a required policy by the state to have on the books. We had a policy that was pretty old. It was last revisited in 2015. We looked at starting to update and revise that, and we realized that the MSMA recommended policy was close to what we had, and the places where it differed were basically places where state law had changed and the policy needed to be updated to correspond to state law. It might be worth noting that a lot of the actual practical implementation of this exists in student handbooks. It's outside of policy. This is kind of just setting a broad framework and incorporating the state law relevant to student discipline. So it looks like a wholesale revision, you know, a complete replacement of a policy with another policy, but if you match them up, they're actually quite close. And most of the differences, I think all of the differences trace back to changes in state law since 2015. So I would make a motion to approve policy JK as presented as to adopt policy JK as presented as a revision. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. And the last one is JKF. Similar, well, so this is really kind of, you know, anchor policy. Most of the action is in JKF -R, which is a multi-page document. And so the policy committee wanted to get feedback from Lisa on that. So we're not bringing JKF-R forward. This is really just like I said, kind of an anchor point informally in the policies. The -Rs are part of policies, but they're not legally enforced unless they're attached to an anchor policy, and that's what this is. So really all we did is get rid of the outdated name of the district, get rid of Riverside, and update some of the legal references. So I would make a motion to adopt policy JK as presented, accepting that the NEPM code up at the top is corrected to say JKF instead of JIC-E3. I think how that happened. But to adopt the policy as presented with that one code correction as a revision. Is there a second?
A second.
I'm assuming Riverside will no longer be in that.
Yeah. Are you seeing the other changes? It's been dropped out and marked up.
Maybe it dropped and.
Yeah, I don't see those changes. Oh, I think we had this happen last time. You have to be a member of the policy folder to see this.
The Riverside and updated the legal reference.
That's good.
Yeah, we should fix that. Or maybe just.
We need to make them download and then repost rather than links.
I think it's hard the changes to that way.
Yeah, you have to do it. You have to do it a really particular way.
You have to download it as a Word document and then print it as a PDF.
You can just make the entire board members.
That's why I think you make board members all have access to the policy
That would
folder.
be the easiest.
Because I see the changes that you probably see them too, Mark, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just change the permissions on the policy folder. Yeah. Okay, so there's a motion, I think, to do second, Mark.
Yes.
Any further discussion or questions? Again, JKF-R will be coming forward at a future time after review by the Student Services Coordinator Director. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. We're slowly purging the Riverside references. It's kind of depressing. There was a 3-year process of updating all the policies to have Riverside in them. And now we're, I caught the tail end of that, and now we're going through the process to purge them.
I thought you were going to say that was a depressing period of time.
There was that too. Okay, last item on the action items is approve a safety care coordinator stipend. This was an added item. You have something in your folder about that, Meredith?
Yes, this was one that went through the safety committee in May, and I missed it when I was reviewing to see what I needed to bring to you. And so we needed to fill this officially. Someone's been doing the role this year, but we needed to bring this to you to make you aware and ask you to approve this stipend position. So it's someone who's keeping us in compliance with safety care, which is the required training for staff who are responsible for restraint and seclusion for the district. So ask you to approve this as a trial, or actually not as a trial, as a $500 set stipend. We're not going to do a trial this one.
I would make a motion to approve the stipend position for safety care certification coordinator at a $500 stipend. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Okay. So we're on to committee reports. Let's see, policy subcommittee. I was just looking at my
we did not meet since our last board meeting.
What's that?
I don't think the policy.
We haven't met. I was just going to say our next meeting, I think, is next week, a week from Thursday.
Yeah.
So yeah, mostly just working through the policy revisions. I think there's also going to be a discussion on student gate receipts.
Yeah, that and the J's.
Yeah. UTC.
Sure, I can connect a little bit to what Meredith was saying earlier. UTC is looking at a service called Zero Eyes. I don't know how many cameras we have in the school, but UTC has quite a few cameras already, both for internal and external. And so we're going to get a presentation in February, but Zero Eyes is a company that uses artificial intelligence through existing security cameras. I have mixed views about AI, but it identifies, I don't know, almost 300 firearms. So a person walks into a parking lot, pulls something out of their car. Within seconds, it's confirmed they have several call centers or whatever with retired law enforcement and veterans who, if the AI says, I think there's a gun, then a person is prompted and the person looks at it. And if it's a gun, they push a button. All the school people are notified. All the local law enforcement is notified. And so there's this quick response thing. It matters to UTC because there are so many people coming in and out of the building so often. And you know, you hear all these horrible numbers like these various shootings where the person wandered around for 5 minutes or 7 minutes before anybody noticed. So anyway, I don't think it's anywhere near the prices that were mentioned earlier, but again, you do have to have all the cameras. So I can keep folks, I guess, updated as to whether they choose this, but everyone's trying to figure out some solution to the fact that as a culture, we're not going to address the proliferation of weapons and people using them. So schools have to, apparently, we have to do something, right? Keep our kids safe. So UTC's, most of our last meeting was about Zero Eyes, exploring that. And they're going to come visit UTC in February.
So kind of building on Noah's unexpressed, verbally unexpressed reaction. The safety implications seem really important and impactful because time is important. Is facial recognition being used in this software, and is there a policy that UTC has in place about facial recognition of cameras?
They say
that data.
Right.
What else could that data be used for?
Right.
Just because your stated purpose of it is to identify a firearm, there's all kinds of other data that presumably this company will now have access to. Is there going to be some kind of a safeguard around that?
I haven't heard directly from Zero Eyes. The director was kind of briefing us, and she said not. but these are some questions I'm concerned with as well, especially given the fact that, you know, these are kids. So supposedly nothing's recorded or anything.
I mean, I'm a big fan of detecting firearms around schools, and I would also agree that there's a larger problem there that needs to be dealt with, but that's beyond our scope. But something like this scares me to death.
I was unnerved.
So, I mean, so the instruments that a board level group has, right, are the contract with the company and the policy for the district. So those are places I would appreciate. You know, I think we're on the same page, so I would appreciate your broken questions around those.
I'll report back. It's pretty neat. I mean, and terrifying. It's just I had to have some beverages when I returned home. The staff is an app, so you can actually tell where the person is in the building too, and then where they were recently seen. It's bizarre. I don't know how I feel about it. It's like, oh, they were in the hallway in the second floor within 30 seconds. You know, yeah, it's
well, to be honest, if somebody's walking around the school with a gun, I think that's fantastic, right? Not that they're doing that, but that we can track that.
Yeah, no. I mean,
but
they're selling
if they're right,
yeah.
But if there's facial recognition of individual students, right, student privacy becomes a concern. Recording of information of what happens in schools becomes a concern. It's not technically a perfect concern, but privacy of students is a concern. So it's like every technology, right? It's really ultimately about how we use it. And as a board, we have the ability to put legally enforceable restrictions about how it's used. So I think that's the important piece here.
Good advice, thank you.
Was it more eventful than usual UPC or?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I prefer talking about their cooking.
Yeah, that just made us all jealous. So.
I should tell you.
Dave, can you from Spruce?
No, nothing new from Spruce. I haven't heard in the future of things.
Curriculum subcommittee, I think, has met since the last time.
Susan kind of reported it. She put it in her report.
In her report. Yep. Facilities and building committee. I think we've discussed, you know, what's happening with the board. There's still lots of little nagging details and more work pushing forward on the new construction. But the big picture, I think the board's up to date on. Yeah,
I shared the, sorry.
I just have a quick question. I didn't know if it's quite that, but like, what did we ever get a piano? What is that?
We did not get a piano. It was determined that the one we were looking at was a little too big for the space we had on side stage, and so we haven't yet. A piano that, you know, is dedicated just to the stage. We have a piano that we can move onto the stage.
But maybe it's just that little.
Right, that's correct. Yeah. But I thought you might ask or say something about, like, you asked last meeting to get copies of all the drawings that we've gotten from Haley Ward on the 4 projects. I sent those out, and I don't know if you had any questions about those, or, but we're moving forward with Haley Ward on the 2 projects that we discussed. Had an initial meeting with them last week.
Wellness committee. The leadership team still in the same state. I forget if it's later this week or next week. The leadership team will come back and pull together work in the subcommittees, which are not necessarily completing their work, but will at least report back to the leadership team, and there will be more probably to report back to the board at that point. Any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? Any public comment? All right, I see a lot of people who want to get home, so seeing no public comment. Our next board meeting is February 7th, 6 p.m. in the library and on Zoom. Is there a request for information or follow-up?
I have one. This is probably most appropriate for Susan and or Sam. I noticed in Susan's report that the curriculum committee is going to consider those new course proposals at the next meeting. If we could just get whatever you have, like a description, a proposal, or if there's a draft syllabus, whatever you have, if we can get that far enough in advance that we can work through them. Because I know that Meredith had said there was quite a few, not all of them will be coming, but with a big number, I wouldn't want to have to be looking at those on the fly at that meeting.
We can definitely do that. I think Meredith Higgins, Meredith Diamond and I are meeting on the 30th to make sure that those are ready to go to curriculum. So shortly after that meeting, and before the 9th of September of February, we can get them to you.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other requests for information? I would motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
My second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Enjoy your 3 a.m. ending. This may be our last meeting before we go to November.
Really is. You need to fall asleep, Brian.
I stayed awake. I don't think I even yelled on camera. Yeah.